In the NFL draft, teams having consecutive picks is nothing new. It's pretty common to have them in the later rounds, but in the early rounds, especially in round 1, it is extremely rare. But in the 2023 NFL draft, the Houston Texans decided to roll the dice, not only selecting CJ Stroud with the number 2 pick, but trading up with the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 3, linebacker Will Anderson Jr. The end result? Both won Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year. After that trade happened, it got me thinking, has there ever been an NFL draft where one team holds the first and second overall picks? Well, actually, it's happened twice. The first time took place in 1958 with the old Chicago Cardinals. But since that was so long ago and nobody really remembers the Chicago Cardinals, we're not going to go too deep into that. But the second time this happened took place in 1992. Before I go further into the draft, we need to provide more context on the franchise we're going to be covering. By 1992, the Indianapolis Colts had gone from one of the bedrock franchises to a complete laughingstock. It all began in the 1950s when they were one of the league's bedrock franchises. They were the Baltimore Colts at the time, and the city loved them with a passion. The 1958 NFL Championship game helped launch the league into the future when Johnny Unitas led a 2-minute drive, which was absolutely unheard of at the time, ending with a game-winning touchdown. The franchise peaked in 1970 when they won Super Bowl V, but shortly thereafter, it all began to fall apart. It all began when Carroll Rosenblum, the Baltimore Colts owner, wanted to leave the city due to issues with Memorial Stadium. In Los Angeles, the Rams owner, Robert Irsay, was looking to jump ship as well. Rosenblum got the Rams, Irsay got the Colts, and really the rest is history. During Irsay's tenure as the Baltimore Colts owner, they did have a few playoff appearances, but for the most part, the franchise deteriorated, especially in the final years. He was threatening to move the team to Memphis, to Phoenix, to Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Colts? Ugh. The city of Indianapolis later joined the bidding war, and Irsay fell in love with their new dome stadium. Baltimore tried keeping the team through something called eminent domain. When Robert Irsay caught wind of this, what was his response? To sneak the team out in the middle of the night, ushering in a new era for the franchise, the Indianapolis Colts. And it was truly a new era, not just because of the relocation, but Robert Irsay decided to have his son, Jim Irsay, take the title of general manager. Now, ultimately, did this lead to more wins? Well, not exactly. In those first 3 seasons from 84 to 86, they combined for 12 wins until Jim Irsay decided he needed to make a blockbuster deal. Hall of Fame running back Eric Dickerson wanted out of his contract with the Los Angeles Rams, and the Colts were willing to put up a blockbuster trade. In the short term, they turned it around, finishing 9-6 and winning the AFC East. While they lost in the divisional playoffs to the Cleveland Browns, fans got the feeling that they would be right back. Oh boy, were they wrong. But what's frustrating is, from 1988 to 1990, it's not like they were winning just 1, 2, or 3 games a season. 9-7 in 88 wasn't good enough to make the playoffs, and 8-8 and 7-9 over the next 2 seasons had the team ranging from above to just below average. 1991 was when the bottom officially fell out. The previous season, they had made another blockbuster trade to draft quarterback Jeff George with the first overall pick. And by year 2, they realized he wasn't that guy. But they had a ton of other problems as well, and after an 0-5 start, Ron Meyer was fired. They finished the season 1-15 with the NFL's worst offense as well as the 3rd worst defense. While the season didn't go well at all, at least there was a silver lining. They would end up with the number 1 overall pick. But not just that, they also pulled off a deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to hold the rights to the number 2 overall pick as well. Now you're probably thinking, well, they definitely had to shell out some capital for sure. Probably 2 or 3 firsts, 2 or 3 seconds is included as well. Maybe a player here and there. Well, actually, they didn't have to give up much. During the 1990 offseason, the Colts traded quarterback Chris Chandler to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in exchange for a first-round pick, and the Buccaneers fell for it. Chandler only started 6 games for the team, losing all of them, throwing 5 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. The Buccaneers went 3-13 in 1991, giving the Colts the 2nd overall pick. For the second time in NFL history, one team owns the rights to the first 2 overall picks, and it was pretty clear from the get-go what they were going to do with the first one. With the first overall pick in the 1992 NFL Draft, the Indianapolis Colts select Steve Ettman, defensive end, Washington. Steve Ettman was a man amongst boys in college. He was one of the most dominant defensive players the collegiate game has ever seen. He not only won the Outland and Lombardi awards, but he finished 4th in the Heisman voting. Think about that. A defensive end was a Heisman Trophy finalist. That's unheard of in today's game. Everyone was searching for the next Reggie White, and many analysts and insiders felt he could be that. Even Reggie White's former coach, Buddy Ryan, co-signed on this, calling Ettman the most dominant player in the country.
Clear-cut #1 guy. You see him here stuffing the run, collapsing the pocket, getting after the quarterback. I remember talking to Buddy Ryan, former Eagle coach, early in the year. Buddy said this was the best player in the country.
There's never going to be another Reggie White. And Steve Ettman was certainly far from it in the NFL. During his rookie season, he played in a little more than half of the games. That would be the most games he played throughout his entire career. The reason he didn't work out in the NFL wasn't because of lack of work ethic or even lack of talent. The peak of his career took place in a game against the Miami Dolphins, when Hall of Fame quarterback Dan Marino was leading them to a game-winning drive, when all of a sudden Steve Ettman out of nowhere intercepted the ball and ran it all the way for the game-clinching touchdown. Look how fast a freaking defensive lineman is moving. This guy was an athletic freak. Unfortunately, his body just couldn't hold up. In his 3 seasons with the Indianapolis Colts, Ettman played a total of 18 games. Just to put into context in case you're not aware, the NFL had 16 games per season at the time. Before injuries ended his rookie season, he had 49 total tackles as well as 3 sacks and the interception we talked about earlier, as well as a forced fumble. That's honestly not bad for a rookie, but when you put into context that he was the #1 overall pick, you obviously had expected a whole lot more from someone who is considered the most dominant player in college football at the time. He was let go after 1994 and spent 3 more seasons in the league, playing for both Miami and Washington. Now that was the first overall pick. What about the other? With the 2nd overall pick in the 1992 NFL Draft, the Indianapolis Colts select Quinton Coriat, linebacker, Texas A&M. Now, Coriat's journey to being selected by the Indianapolis Colts is way different than Ettman. In his first couple of years at Texas A&M, he didn't play a single down. Why? Because of failing Proposition 48. But when he finally got his chance to get on the field, it became apparent right away that Coriat was a dog surrounded by other dogs. The Aggies had one of the best defensive units ever, nicknamed the Wrecking Crew. I'll put it like this: of the 11 starters on that defense, 6 went on to play in the NFL. But of all these potential pro players, he was the centerpiece, and the Indianapolis Colts took notice. Now, there was the argument that, well, maybe he's just a really good college football player surrounded by other really good or really great players, and maybe it's masking a lot of his flaws. But I disagree with that when you look at his body of work in the NFL. Now, I'm going to be straight up with you. When it comes to expectations of a number 2 overall pick, Quinton Coriat certainly didn't live up to him. But when you look at his body of work while he was in the league, he was without question a solid player. Now, just like Edmund, Coryat's rookie season also ended early due to injuries, but from 1993 to 1995, he played in all 16 games. In 2 of those 3 seasons where he played all 16 games, he had 2 seasons with over 100 tackles at least, and in 1994, when he had under 100 tackles, he had a total of 93. Now, he wasn't exactly getting a whole lot of sacks and wasn't the greatest turnover machine, but at the end of the day, those are some very solid numbers for any NFL linebacker. Now, obviously, the Colts were pleased because during the 1996 offseason, he was a restricted free agent and signed a $17.5 million offer sheet with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts ended up matching that deal. That's where the downfall really began. He had one more season where he started every single game, while the 2 others were cut short due to injury. 1998 was cut short extremely because he was waived before the start of the regular season and underwent reconstructive surgery on his left shoulder that late September. He attempted a comeback with the Dallas Cowboys in 1999, but because of an Achilles injury as well as more problems with his shoulder, he announced his retirement that September, but then he later came back to actually play in 4 games. After his release in February of 2000, that's when he officially retired from the game. Now, with these 2 picks not exactly living up to the hype of being selected number 1 and number 2 overall, how did it affect the Colts? Surprisingly, not a whole lot. In fact, they were performing really the same as usual if you remember the records I had mentioned in the beginning of the video. In 1992, they ended up going from 1-15 to 9-7. The following year in 1993, they bottomed out at 4-12. Then in 1994, they were back to being average at 8-8. Then all of a sudden in 1995, they go 9-7, actually make the playoffs this time, but end up making it all the way to the AFC Championship game and lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers by only 4 points. They were only 5 points away from playing the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. Now, they definitely would have gotten smashed for sure, but oh my gosh, that would have been one of the most random teams to ever make the Super Bowl, and just the fact they came that close, unbelievable. While Coryat was one of the major reasons the team made it to the AFC Championship game, he was also one of the major reasons they ended up not making the Super Bowl, because in that game, he dropped a potential game-changing interception. Now, how is this possible that a team could whiff on both the number 1 and number 2 overall picks and still make the AFC Championship game less than 5 seasons later? Well, it's because most of the teams from the 1992 NFL Draft didn't have any hits because that draft class in particular is considered the worst in NFL history. It's one of the only draft classes from way back in the day that has 0 Hall of Famers.
When the Indianapolis Colts football team is pretty good and gives them a chance to build on that throughout the rest of this great draft.
Now, they did have a few players make at least 5 Pro Bowls: wide receiver Jimmy Smith, cornerback Troy Vincent, and safety Darren Woodson. And you can't forget Desmond Howard's contribution to the 1996 Packers Super Bowl, but his career for the most part was a massive bust. I can't think of a worse draft to have not only the first, but also the second overall picks. And the NFL agrees with me because on their website, back in 2015, they did a list of the 5 worst number 1 and 2 overall draft pick combos in the modern era, and at number 1 was Steve Ettman and Quentin Coryat. In a combined 132 games, they produced 0 Pro Bowls, and on that list, they are the only duo to have been drafted by the same team. Going back to the old Chicago Cardinals back in 1958, they at least had 1 player make All-Pro. So even for a franchise that nobody remembers, they did a way better job with their 1 and 2 consecutive picks than the Indianapolis Colts in 1992. In conclusion, this is a reminder that the NFL draft is certainly not a guarantee. This is proof that trading for multiple first-round picks isn't a guaranteed success, even if they are the first and second ones. If your favorite NFL team is looking to trade for multiple first-rounders, they better have done their research that whatever draft class they decide to do that in is at least a good one. While the 2023 Houston Texans hit it big with their consecutive first-round picks, you also have sad cases like the 1992 Indianapolis Colts. But when you look at the big picture, it really didn't matter. After their AFC Championship game appearance, they fell off a cliff in 1997, landing the first overall pick in 1998. And who did they select?
The Indianapolis Colts select quarterback, University of Tennessee, Peyton Manning.
Both Steve Ettman and Quentin Coryatt, while they didn't work out, they at least helped them set the course to draft one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history.
The Colts of Indianapolis win Super Bowl 41.
Like I said, I'm just proud to be a part of the team, and we've stuck together, and it sure is a great feeling, and we're glad to bring this trophy back to Indianapolis.